Hello everyone, before we begin tonight's haunting tale, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a moment of the fear. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time the unknown feels closest to you. The train station stood like a relic from another time, its grand arches and cracked marble floors bathed in the amber glow of flickering gaslights. Emma Reed tightened her scarf against the chill that crept through the old building, the air thick with the scent of aged wood and faint, lingering smoke from decades past. She paused at the entrance to Platform 7, where the restored Argent Star waited in stately silence. The sight was enough to take her breath away. The train was a masterpiece of Art Deco design, its silver hull gleaming like polished armor beneath the dull light. The sleek curves and intricate carvings on its exterior whispered of luxury and grandeur, the kind that had enchanted the world in its heyday. But beneath the pristine restoration, Emma could feel something else, an undercurrent of history that was less glamorous and far more unsettling. She pulled out her notebook, her fingers brushing against the leather cover as she flipped to her notes. The Argent Star was infamous, not just for its elegance but for the unsolved mystery that had marred its maiden voyage decades ago. In 1932, a passenger named Margaret Harrow vanished during a stormy night, leaving behind nothing but an open window and a single torn glove. The case had captivated and confounded investigators, and now, with the train's return to operation, Emma intended to uncover the truth. Emma climbed aboard, her shoes clicking on the polished steps as she entered the vestibule. Inside, the train was a marvel of restoration. The brass fixtures gleamed, the velvet upholstery was rich and inviting, and the faint scent of lavender lingered in the air, as if the past itself had been perfumed. Her cabin, number 5, was cozy yet opulent. A small table by the window held a vase of fresh lilies, and the bed was draped in soft, cream-colored linens. Yet, as Emma unpacked her bag, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The mirrors seemed to catch her movements just a second too late, and the gentle creaks of the train settling into place sounded like distant footsteps. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. She opened it to find a petite, bespectacled woman grinning at her. "Naomi Wu," the woman said, offering a hand. "Train enthusiast, amateur historian, and your neighbor in cabin 6. You're Emma Reed, right? The journalist." Emma smiled, shaking her hand. "Guilty as charged. Are you here for the reopening too?" Naomi's eyes lit up. "Oh, absolutely. This train is a legend. The craftsmanship, the history, everything." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But you're here for the Margaret Harrow mystery, aren't you?" Emma raised an eyebrow. "You seem well informed." Naomi shrugged. "The train's history is my passion. If you need someone to show you the ropes, or the railways, I'm your girl." Before Emma could respond, a deep voice interrupted them. "I'd suggest keeping an open mind, Ms. Reed. Some mysteries are best left unsolved." Turning, Emma saw a tall man in his late 40s, his sharp features framed by graying hair. He held a leather briefcase and radiated an air of quiet authority. "Dr. Arthur Bell," he said, extending a hand. "Physicist. My cabin's just down the hall. And if I'm not mistaken, you're the reporter who covered the Pendleton Asylum case last year?" Emma nodded, caught off guard. "That's right. And you're familiar with my work?" "Let's just say I have an interest in unexplained phenomena," Arthur replied. "Though I'd caution you to tread carefully here. The Argent Star has a way of unsettling even the most rational minds." With that, he nodded politely and walked away, leaving Emma and Naomi exchanging curious glances. Dinner that evening was served in the opulent dining car, its crystal chandeliers casting warm light over the elegantly set tables. Emma found herself seated with Naomi and Dr. Bell, the latter barely touching his food as he reviewed a notebook filled with complex equations. Naomi, on the other hand, was eagerly recounting the train's storied past. "They say the Argent Star is haunted," Naomi said, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Margaret Harrow's disappearance is just the tip of the iceberg. There were rumors of other strange occurrences, lights flickering, passengers hearing whispers in empty hallways, even time bending." Arthur scoffed softly. "Time doesn't bend. It's a constant, unyielding force. What people interpret as anomalies are often tricks of perception. Naomi smirked. You sound like someone trying to convince themselves. Before Arthur could respond, the lights flickered. A hush fell over the dining car, and for a moment, the only sound was the rhythmic clatter of the train wheels on the tracks. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the moment passed, and the conversation resumed. Emma glanced at the chandelier, its crystals swaying gently as though disturbed by a phantom breeze. Her instincts prickled. Later that night, Emma couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the storm lash against the glass. The train rocked gently, the sound of rain merging with the steady rhythm of the wheels. She thought about Margaret Harrow, about the torn glove left behind on her seat. What had she seen that night? What had she feared? Unable to shake her restlessness, Emma decided to explore. She stepped into the corridor, the dim lighting casting long shadows on the walls. As she walked, she noticed something peculiar. The air seemed heavier, as though the train itself were holding its breath. Near the end of the car, she found a door slightly ajar. Inside was a storage compartment, filled with forgotten artifacts from the train's original run, suitcases, hatboxes, and an old conductor's ledger. Flipping through its pages, Emma's breath caught when she saw the entry for Margaret Harrow. Next to her name, in faint pencil marks, was a single word, missing. And below it, scrawled in shaky handwriting, was a cryptic note, * the loop tightens. Beware the forgotten. Behind her, a faint sound like a whisper. Emma spun around, but the corridor was empty. Returning to her cabin, Emma found Naomi waiting outside, her face pale. Did you hear that? Naomi asked. Someone was walking up and down the hall, but when I looked, no one was there. Emma hesitated, then showed Naomi the ledger. Naomi's eyes widened as she read the note. This isn't right. I've read every record on the Argent Star. That phrase, it's never been mentioned. Maybe it's something they tried to cover up, Emma suggested, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Whatever it is, I think it's connected to Margaret Harrow. Before they could discuss further, Dr. Bell appeared at the end of the hallway, his face shadowed. Ladies, he said, his tone measured but tense. I believe we're being watched. And if my calculations are correct, this train is far more than it seems. Naomi frowned. What do you mean? Arthur hesitated before answering, his gaze fixed on Emma. Have either of you experienced déjà vu? Emma's stomach tightened. She thought of the torn photograph in her cabin, the flickering lights, the sense of being observed. She nodded slowly. Arthur's expression darkened. Then I suggest we prepare ourselves. This journey may not end where we expect. As the train plunged deeper into the storm, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading not just into the heart of a mystery, but into the unknown itself. The air grew colder, and the whispers became harder to dismiss. With every passing moment, it became clear, the Argent Star was hiding more than secrets. It was alive, and it was waiting. The train continued its journey, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the tracks a constant, almost hypnotic backdrop. Emma Reed sat in the plush dining car, her notebook open in front of her. Despite the grandeur of the setting, the crystal chandeliers swaying gently with the motion of the train and the polished mahogany panels reflecting the warm light, she couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her. The first sign of something amiss had been subtle. A waiter, young and seemingly out of place among the seasoned staff, had approached her table earlier. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he poured her coffee. "Enjoy your journey, miss," he had murmured, his voice tinged with something she couldn't quite place, fear, regret. Before she could ask him anything, he had disappeared into the galley, leaving her with a cup of steaming coffee and a growing sense of curiosity. Emma's thoughts were interrupted as Dr. Arthur Bell entered the car. His presence was impossible to miss. He carried an air of quiet authority, his sharp eyes scanning the room as if cataloguing every detail. He spotted Emma and approached her table. "Miss Reed," he said, his tone clipped but polite. "I trust you're finding the accommodations satisfactory?" "They're wonderful, Dr. Bell," Emma replied, gesturing for him to sit. "Though I have to admit, the atmosphere here is unique." Arthur chuckled, though it sounded hollow. "Unique is one way to put it. Have you noticed anything unusual?" Emma hesitated. She had, but she wasn't sure how much to share. "What do you mean?" Arthur leaned in, lowering his voice. "This train. It's not like any other. I've been reviewing some of the schematics and logs, and there are anomalies. Time discrepancies in the schedules, for one. And then there's the layout. Have you noticed how the compartments seem to shift? One moment the dining car is near the observation deck, and the next, it's several cars away." Emma's heart quickened. She hadn't noticed the shifting layout, but now that he mentioned it, there had been moments where she'd felt disoriented. "What do you think is happening?" she asked. "I have a theory," Arthur said, his expression grave. "But I need more data before I can say anything definitive. Just be vigilant." As Arthur left, Emma's attention was drawn to Naomi Wu, who was seated a few tables away. The young train enthusiast was flipping through a dog-eared book about the train's history, her brow furrowed in concentration. Sensing Emma's gaze, Naomi looked up and offered a small smile. Emma took it as an invitation and moved to join her. "This train has a fascinating history," Naomi said before Emma could even ask. "Did you know it was decommissioned for decades before it was restored? There's a lot of mystery surrounding its original construction. Some say it was a prototype for experimental technology." "Experimental technology?" Emma echoed, intrigued. Naomi nodded. "The company that built it was rumored to be working on ways to manipulate time. Nothing concrete, of course, but there are reports of strange incidents during its initial runs, passengers disappearing, unexplained delays, things like that." Emma felt a chill run down her spine. The parallels to the present were too strong to ignore. "Have you noticed anything strange on this trip?" she asked. Naomi hesitated, her eyes darting around the room. "I don't know if it's just my imagination, but, yes. People seem to vanish for hours at a time and then reappear as if nothing happened. And I swear I've seen the same passenger in 2 different places at once." The 2 women exchanged a look, unspoken understanding passing between them. Whatever was happening, it wasn't normal. Later that evening, as Emma returned to her compartment, she found a folded piece of paper slipped under her door. Her name was scrawled across it in an unfamiliar hand. She unfolded it carefully, her pulse quickening as she read the words. "Beware the midnight stop. Not everyone returns." Emma looked around the corridor, but it was empty. She tucked the note into her pocket and locked her door, her mind racing. Who had left it? And what did they mean? At precisely midnight, the train came to a halt. Emma peered through her window but saw nothing outside, just an impenetrable darkness that seemed to swallow the light. The air grew heavy, and a sense of foreboding settled over her. A knock at her door startled her. She opened it to find Naomi and Arthur standing there, both looking unsettled. "Did you feel that?" Naomi asked. "It's like the air itself is wrong." Arthur nodded. "I think the train has stopped outside of time. We need to investigate." The trio made their way to the observation car, where they found several other passengers gathered. The air was thick with unease, and whispers filled the room. A man in a conductor's uniform entered, his face obscured by shadows. He raised a hand for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonant and otherworldly. "Welcome to the midnight stop. You have been chosen to witness an event that transcends time itself. But beware, the choices you make here will determine your fate." Before anyone could respond, the lights flickered, and the conductor vanished. In his place stood a doorway that hadn't been there before, glowing with an eerie blue light. Emma, Arthur, and Naomi exchanged glances, their fear and curiosity warring within them. "What do we do?" Naomi whispered. Arthur stepped forward, his jaw set. "We find out the truth. Whatever it takes." As they passed through the doorway, they found themselves in a corridor that defied logic. The walls shimmered, and the floor seemed to ripple beneath their feet. Doors lined the hallway, each marked with a name. Emma stopped in front of one that bore her own name and hesitated. What lay beyond? "Should we open them?" Naomi asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Arthur studied the doors, his brow furrowed. "These are not just doors. They're choices. Be careful." Emma took a deep breath and turned the handle. The room beyond was a perfect replica of her childhood bedroom. Memories flooded back, and for a moment, she felt a sense of peace. But then she noticed the shadows in the corners, shifting and watching. "What is this place?" she murmured. "It's a test," Arthur said from behind her. "The train is showing us something, our pasts, our fears, our desires. But we can't let it control us." The trio continued down the corridor, each door revealing a piece of their lives they'd rather forget. Naomi saw the accident that had claimed her parents. Arthur faced the ridicule of his peers. Emma confronted the guilt of a story she'd buried to save herself. But as they reached the end of the corridor, they found one final door, unmarked and pulsating with light. Emma turned to her companions. "This is it. Whatever's behind this door, it's the answer." They opened it together, stepping into the unknown. The unmarked door swung open, revealing a cavernous space that seemed impossibly large for a train. The walls shimmered with an ethereal glow, pulsating in rhythm with an unseen heartbeat. Emma, Arthur, and Naomi stepped inside, their senses overwhelmed by the sheer otherworldliness of the scene. "What is this place?" Naomi whispered, her voice trembling. The walls seemed alive, undulating and whispering words they couldn't quite make out. Arthur adjusted his glasses, his expression a mixture of awe and apprehension. "This isn't just a train. It's some kind of nexus, a crossing point between realities." Emma scanned the room, her journalist instincts kicking in despite the rising fear. "Look," she said, pointing to a pedestal in the center of the space. On it rested a small, intricate device that appeared to be a clock, its hands spinning erratically. Around it, shadows moved, twisting and turning as if alive. As they approached, a deep, resonant voice filled the chamber. "Welcome, travelers," it said. The shadows coalesced into a humanoid form, its features indistinct but its presence oppressive. "You have come far, but your journey is only beginning." Emma swallowed hard, forcing herself to speak. "Who are you? What is this place?" The figure tilted its head, as if amused. "I am the custodian, keeper of this junction. You are aboard the Luxie Turner, a vessel caught in the loops of time. Your presence here is no accident." Arthur stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear. "Why us? What do you want from us?" The custodian's form flickered, and its voice grew darker. "You were chosen for your ties to the past and your potential to shape the future. But first, you must prove yourselves worthy. The train is a crucible, and its trials will reveal who you truly are." The shadows around the clock began to writhe more violently, and the custodian extended a hand toward Emma. "It begins with you," it said. "Choose a path." A circle of doors appeared around the pedestal, each marked with a different symbol. Emma felt a pull toward one, a door etched with a quill and parchment. She hesitated, glancing back at Arthur and Naomi. "What if it's a trap?" Naomi asked, her voice edged with panic. Arthur placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We don't have a choice. This is the only way forward." Emma took a deep breath and opened the door. Instantly, she was engulfed in light, and the world around her shifted. Emma found herself in a newsroom, the clatter of typewriters and the hum of conversation filling the air. It was her first job as a journalist, and the scene was achingly familiar. But something was off. The people moved like actors in a play, their faces blank and their actions mechanical. A voice echoed in her mind. "Face your past, or be consumed by it." Emma's heart sank as she saw the figure of her former editor, a man whose trust she had betrayed. He handed her a file, his expression stern. "The truth is in here," he said. "But are you willing to pay the price to uncover it?" She opened the file and was confronted with images and documents she thought she had buried long ago. It was the story that had made her career, but at the cost of an innocent source's safety. Guilt and shame washed over her. "Do you regret your choice?" the voice asked, its tone neither accusatory nor forgiving. "Yes," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But I can't change the past." "Then prove you have learned," the voice replied. The newsroom dissolved, and she was back in the chamber, Arthur and Naomi waiting anxiously. Naomi's door was marked with the silhouette of a train, its wheels wreathed in flames. She stepped through reluctantly, and the scene shifted to a bustling station. Her parents were there, waving at her from the platform. But as she tried to reach them, the train doors slammed shut, and the locomotive began to move. "No!" Naomi screamed, pounding on the glass. Her parents' faces were calm, serene, as if they didn't notice her anguish. "You carry the weight of loss," the voice said. "But do you let it define you?" The train began to vanish into the distance, and Naomi felt a surge of helplessness. "I don't want to lose them again," she said, tears streaming down her face. "To move forward, you must let go," the voice replied. "Only then can you honor their memory." Naomi closed her eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. When she opened them, she was back in the chamber, her hands trembling but her resolve firm. Arthur's door bore the image of a swirling vortex. He entered, finding himself in a lecture hall filled with jeering faces. On the podium before him was the device he had created, the one that had ruined his reputation. "You sought knowledge," the voice said, "but at what cost?" Arthur picked up the device, his hands shaking. "I only wanted to understand," he said. "But they called me a fool." "Do you still believe in your vision?" the voice asked. "Or has their scorn broken you?" Arthur hesitated, then tightened his grip on the device. "I believe," he said, his voice steady, "even if no one else does." The jeering faces faded, replaced by silence. Arthur returned to the chamber, his expression resolute. The custodian reappeared, its form more solid now. "You have faced your pasts and emerged stronger. But the true test lies ahead." The clock on the pedestal began to spin faster, its hands blurring. The chamber shook, and a new doorway appeared, this one marked with a symbol none of them recognized, a spiral that seemed to draw their gazes inexorably inward. "What happens if we fail?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The custodian's form flickered. "Failure means becoming part of the loop, trapped in the cycles of time. Success brings its own cost." The trio exchanged glances, fear and determination mingling in their eyes. Without another word, they stepped through the doorway together. On the other side, they found themselves in the train's engine room, but it was nothing like they expected. The machinery was alive, pulsating with energy, and the walls were lined with mirrors that reflected not their present selves, but their pasts. The voice returned, colder now. "The engine is the heart of the loop. To break it, you must destroy what binds you to the past." "What does that mean?" Naomi asked, her voice shaking. "It means sacrifice," Arthur said grimly. "We have to let go of everything holding us back." The mirrors began to crack, and the room filled with a deafening roar. Emma, Arthur, and Naomi braced themselves, knowing that their next choice would determine not just their fates, but the fate of everyone on the train. The train's engine room pulsed with an otherworldly energy, its heart beating like a living creature. Mirrors lined the walls, fractured and shimmering, each reflecting distorted versions of Emma, Arthur, and Naomi's pasts. The air was thick with tension, as though the very fabric of time trembled around them. The voice of the custodian echoed through the room, its tone cold and commanding. "You stand at the threshold of the loop's core. To break free, you must confront what binds you to this cycle. Will you rise, or will you fall like those before you?" Emma clenched her fists, her gaze darting between the mirrors and the pulsating machinery. "We didn't come this far to give up now. Tell us what we need to do." The custodian's form appeared before them, more solid than ever. It pointed to the central engine, a mass of swirling light and shadow, where time itself seemed to twist and writhe. "The core feeds on the unresolved, on the fragments of your lives you refuse to let go. Sacrifice what you cling to, or remain trapped forever." Emma stepped forward first, her reflection in the nearest mirror drawing her attention. It showed her younger self, eager and ambitious, standing over a pile of articles she'd written. The headline of one stood out, "Anonymous source speaks out, exposing corruption." But beneath the headline was an image of a man whose life her article had ruined, a man she'd promised to protect. The reflection spoke, its voice dripping with accusation. "You chose the story over a life. Was it worth it?" Emma's throat tightened. She remembered the sleepless nights, the guilt that had gnawed at her ever since. "No," she whispered. "It wasn't." The reflection sneered. "Then prove it. Let go of your need to uncover every secret, no matter the cost." A shimmering dagger appeared in Emma's hand, its blade inscribed with the words "The truth hurts." The custodian's voice rang out, "The truth you hold has shaped you, but it also chains you. Destroy it, and you may find freedom." Emma hesitated, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. Finally, with trembling hands, she drove the dagger into the mirror. It shattered, the shards dissolving into light. The core of the engine pulsed violently, as if reacting to her decision. Naomi approached the next mirror, her reflection showing her as a child on a train platform, clutching a toy train as her parents waved goodbye. The scene shifted, showing the moment she learned of their accident, how she had thrown herself into learning everything about trains, hoping to feel closer to them. "You can't save them," the reflection said, its voice soft but unyielding. "But you've spent your life trying to, haven't you?" Tears filled Naomi's eyes. I wanted to keep them with me. And in doing so, you've kept yourself trapped," the reflection replied. "Let them go." A model train appeared in Naomi's hands, glowing faintly. The custodian's voice returned. "The memories you cherish can be a comfort, but they can also be a cage. Release them." Naomi cradled the train for a moment before placing it on the ground. It began to dissolve, its light merging with the core. As it did, the room shook, the engine's energy intensifying. Arthur faced his own mirror, which showed him standing before a group of scientists, his time anomaly device in hand. The reflection spoke with bitterness. "They laughed at you, dismissed you. Do you really think you were wrong?" Arthur's jaw tightened. "I wasn't wrong," he said. "I just didn't have the proof." "Then why do you doubt yourself?" the reflection countered. "Why do you still crave their approval?" A notebook appeared in Arthur's hands, filled with his calculations and diagrams. The custodian's voice echoed once more. "Your pursuit of knowledge is noble, but your need for validation weakens you. Surrender your ego, and you may find clarity." Arthur looked down at the notebook, the pages representing years of work and sacrifice. With a deep breath, he tossed it into the core. The engine roared, its light flaring as the final sacrifice was made. The room grew silent, the engine's pulsations slowing. The custodian's form flickered, then solidified into a shape that was almost human. "You have done what few before you could. You have severed the ties that bound you to the loop." Emma stepped forward, her voice firm. "Does that mean we're free?" The custodian regarded her with an unreadable expression. "Freedom is not without cost. The loop will collapse, but its echoes will remain. Your actions will ripple through time, altering paths you cannot foresee." Naomi frowned. "What happens to the train? To the other passengers?" "The Luxie Turner will cease to exist as you know it," the custodian replied. "Those who remain will be freed from the loop, but they will carry its mark. As will you." Arthur glanced at the core, now pulsating erratically. "What do you mean by mark?" "You will never be the same," the custodian said. "The loop changes all who pass through it. Some for better, others for worse. The choice is yours: step into the unknown, or remain here." The trio exchanged glances, their resolve unwavering. Emma spoke for all of them. "We'll take our chances." The core began to collapse, the room filling with blinding light. The mirrors shattered, their shards swirling around the engine like a storm. The custodian's form dissolved, its voice echoing one last time. "Farewell, travelers. May your choices guide you wisely." As the light consumed them, Emma, Arthur, and Naomi felt a sense of weightlessness, as though they were being pulled through time itself. Fragments of memories and moments flashed around them, glimpses of what could have been, or what might yet be. When the light faded, they found themselves standing on the original train platform, the Luxie Turner nowhere in sight. The air was still, the only sound the distant whistle of a passing train. Emma looked at her hands, half expecting to find the dagger or the file, but they were empty. "We made it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Naomi wiped a tear from her cheek, a bittersweet smile on her face. "But at what cost?" Arthur adjusted his glasses, his expression thoughtful. "Whatever happens next, we've been given a second chance. Let's make it count." As they walked away from the platform, the faint outline of the Luxie Turner shimmered in the distance, a ghostly reminder of the journey they had survived. The platform where Emma, Arthur, and Naomi found themselves was eerily quiet. A fine mist clung to the air, swirling around their feet as if reluctant to let them leave. The Luxie Turner was gone, its haunting whistle a fading echo in the recesses of their minds. Yet the weight of what they had endured remained, heavy and unyielding. Emma broke the silence first, her voice subdued. "Is this it? Are we really free?" Arthur adjusted his glasses, scanning their surroundings with a mixture of skepticism and wonder. The station looked ordinary enough, gleaming brass fixtures, polished wooden benches, and a clock ticking softly above them. But something about it felt off. "We're not where we started," he murmured. "Look at the clock." Emma and Naomi followed his gaze. The hands on the clock weren't moving, stuck at precisely 11:11. The sight sent a shiver down Emma's spine. "What does it mean?" Naomi stepped closer to the clock, squinting at the numbers. "Maybe it's symbolic," she suggested. "A reminder of the loop we escaped. Or maybe we didn't escape at all." Emma frowned. "Don't say that." The trio ventured beyond the platform, stepping into what appeared to be a quaint, idyllic town. Gas lamps lined cobblestone streets, casting a warm glow on the shuttered shops and neatly kept houses. But there were no people, no voices, no movement, just an unsettling stillness. "Where is everyone?" Naomi asked, her voice tinged with unease. Arthur bent down to examine the cobblestones, running his fingers over a faint groove etched into the surface. "This pattern," he said, "it's similar to the symbols we saw in the train's engine room." Emma's stomach churned. "You think this place is connected to the loop?" Arthur nodded slowly. "Or it could be a construct, something left behind by the loop's collapse.